So then move on to Harmless. Now I'm going to be very quick here. This isn't a bad synth by any means. However, this is just a subtractive version of a synthesizer called Harmer, which is basically better in every way. In fact, I think this is still technically an additive synthesizer, because Harmer is basically a really powerful additive synthesizer. I think this is just technically still an additive synthesizer, but it works in a subtractive way. You pick one of these waves here that are already here. The custom, I think, is you put in a file again. So you get a saw, a square, a few other ones that they've made. And then you put filters and stuff on it and make it sound different. It's not bad, but you should really be using Harmer instead if you want the big guns and all that. So what Harmer does is, again, additive synthesis. So the way this works is that this makes all of its sounds with nothing but sine waves. And yet, it manages to make sounds like this. Because again, it's all technically possible with if we just have enough sine waves. So, I must admit, my main problem with Harmer is just the way that it shows the additive synthesis. It actually really confused me, and I think it's done better in Citrus. So, I'm going to use Citrus for now. We'll get back to this synth just to demonstrate this. So, if I set this to the default, which is just a sine wave, if we go into this oscillator tab, here we go. So, we have a sine wave here, and we can see the wave shape over here. All these different things are harmonics. So, the second harmonic is double the pitch of the original pitch. Third is triple, the fourth is quadruple, the fifth is pentuple. You get the point. So yeah, what we have right now is a sine wave, and then if we add another sine wave that's double the pitch, changes the shape a bit, and another one, and another one, and essentially what you can do is eventually you can get to a saw wave. And you can actually make any shape inside Citrus, we'll get to this later, and right click it and go and convert the shape to sine harmonics to see how to make that wave shape with nothing but sine harmonics. And there you go. If you have those sine harmonics on at those volumes, you get a saw wave. There you go. So that is kind of how Harmer works. There's going to be a lot to go over here, so I'm going to have to skim through this one. Let's see. Just set it to the default sort wave again. So, I must admit, another thing with this is that a decent amount of these panels aren't that useful. There are a few that you will use a lot, and most of them you won't use that often. It's kind of a shame this is so big, it's a bit awkward to use. Oh yeah, if you didn't know, what I've just done is I've just selected detached, which means that you can drag the synth above these bits at the top and the left side, which usually you can't do. That's for if you have a synth that's too big for your screen. So yeah. So over here we have a saw wave and a square wave which you can swap between. But we don't just have that. If we go into this graph thing, we can set the sine harmonics however we want. You see, this is why I prefer the way Citrus does it, because trying to express it with this graph thing just makes it more complicated in my opinion. But technically this is the same kind of thing, and I can start doing stuff like this, and it all represents the... You can hear the timbre of the sound is completely changed. So yeah, let's reset that. So that's where you put all your harmonics down. You've got different ones for both of them, and you can crossfade between two of them with that. These subharmonics things just add extra harmonics below where you started. We can actually open a little side menu here which shows all the harmonics, and you can see the subharmonic when it gets added. And same for this one. Same for this one. These are just things that are harmonics of the first one, but are lower pitches than what would usually be in the series. So yeah. Don't mind much about this stuff. It's mostly just like niche stuff or stuff to do with volume and all that. Over here is where you can have filters. Go for the keyboard track it. The width determines how quickly the volume goes down once it hits that cutoff point. If I set this to 0, you can see the volume, it just destroys anything that goes above that point. But if I set it to high width, it very slowly fades it out. There are many different types of filters, and there's even custom shapes where I can pick which frequencies get filtered out. And now interesting stuff. So yeah. There's also resonance over here, and there's different types of resonance too. And you can even move the resonance point around. There's some of the more interesting options include noise, which just puts the resonance points at random spots, I think, with the width controlling how fast it swaps between the different spots. And wormhole, which actually makes the volume lower across at the cutoff point, but then will make the parts next to the cutoff point more loud, which is a little bit interesting. So yeah, there's some interesting options. Can you make custom resonance? I forgot. Oh yeah, you can even make custom resonance shapes, which is quite nice. There's a harmonizer here. I've forgotten exactly what this does, but what this generally does is it adds extra harmonics based on the sound that you already have that like makes sense in its harmonic series. It was either that or it emphasizes harmonics that are already there in, well, a harmonic series, and you can mess with the harmonic series thing over here. The width determines how far the effect goes, and the amount just determines how audible the effect is. And the strength, I'm not sure how that's different from the amount, but it is apparently somehow. As prism, this just is kind of... Okay, so if I go... There's a lot of things over here. Where's harmonic prism? Is it over here? Oh yeah, it is. Sounds quite interesting, but I've always never really been sure what we're supposed to do with this. So basically here you can draw how you want the prism to affect the pitch of everything. So all the harmonics on this part of this grid will be moved up. The pitch will be moved upwards in pitch or downwards in pitch, depending on whether this is obviously above the middle or below the middle. You can kind of see. It's very interesting, but I've always found it difficult to use. Over here we have unison again, with a special Hertz mode, which I don't understand entirely, but it's a very especially kind of detuned version of unison. You can actually see it altering the pitch. It's a bit more harsh, but yeah. This pluck thing is kind of a pre-made thing that basically makes it sound, well, like a pluck. All it really is the volume being lowered and a low pass being applied, but what you can do is you can go to... Is it the harmonic pluck or is it something else? Is it like the pluck shape? Find it on my... Oh, pluck shape. Where you can make it so that it acts differently. See now that we've got these frequencies ranges covered, they take longer to fade out, so that's kind of interesting. And there's a phaser, which is an effect that sounds like this. And for people who already know what phasers are all about and what they do, just a fun little fact about this phaser: it is not actually a phaser, it is just a filter, but it's a filter that makes what a phaser would sound like if you put a phaser on here, because yeah, they can mathematically figure out all that stuff. However, because all it generally does is, as you can see, it removes frequencies in that kind of pattern, and you can change the speed of it and reverse it and keyboard track it. Change the width. The offset just determines where it starts from, like which parts are being taken out and which ones aren't when it starts. Not very important most of the time. But what's especially interesting about this is that this harmonic mode. So what this is all about, all these different modes, is for the keyboard tracking, which basically will obviously usually would go between based on what note you're playing, which is what this octave mode is for. But there's also Hertz mode, which goes between goes off of what frequency you're playing in Hertz, which doesn't have much of a noticeable difference. And then there's harmonic mode. It's a bit more interesting, especially because unison detune could actually mess with what the harmonic mode picks up, and it actually means that when you change the detune, you can actually change the phaser as well. So yeah, pretty cool. Especially good because one of the big things about Harmor is you can alter every individual sine wave. So if we go to harmonic unison pitch, here we can have it so that for each harmonic they get a different amount of pitch difference for each unison voice. They basically use this as a multiplier. So when this is at 0, it doesn't do anything. When this is at 100, obviously it does a lot. So this still matters, but this will be, you can have it be double the effect or nothing compared, or 0 times the effect that it should be when it's down at the bottom. So obviously the middle is just 1, exactly what the effect should be for different harmonics. And when you start also make it so the different harmonics get different amounts of unison pitch, which then also affects the harmonic key tracking on there, you get some very weird kind of stuff, and it's very interesting for when it makes some very unconventional basses. From there, a lot of the other stuff isn't that important. Legato, it's just pitch bending. This I would never recommend using, because the way legato works in Harmor, you have to be playing multiple notes at once for it to do it, and it's much easier just to use this thing instead. I would just use that. Vibrato, just what you think it is. Depth is how much it's vibratoing, and speed is that. Oh yeah, pitch. So frequency, pretty obvious, is just kind of a multiplier for your frequency. If you double it, you get an octave up. Double it again, it's an octave up. If you put 3, obviously it's going to be a bit off. It's going to be 1.5 times. Sorry, 1.5 octaves up. What gets a bit interesting is detune, which is not exactly what you think it is. It's actually the gap between each harmonic. So if I set this to 2, this is going to sound a lot more like a square wave, because a square wave is a saw wave, except every other harmonic you get rid of. So if I double this, it's going to be almost like a square wave. There are going to be more higher harmonics, but the higher harmonics are the quietest already, so it's not going to be very noticeable. Sounds almost exactly like a square. And if I half the detune, we're going to get a very kind of aggressive saw wave. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. You can create some interesting kind of belly kind of sounds with that. Yeah. As for this other stuff below here, oh yeah, I forgot to mention the phaser also has different modes. Most of these aren't that different except for frequency mode, which I'm not going to pretend I understand exactly how this mode works, but basically now instead of filtering, it's changing frequencies. And that's the shape that it uses, and then you can have a custom frequency filter where you mess with the shape. Oh wait, or is that just a custom normal filter? I think that's just a custom normal filter, but never mind. Interesting. By the way, there's also a second section to Harmor, and if you click this link thing, every time you change a knob on the first section, it'll be copied to the second section. You can cross between these with this. You can enable the second section like that. Basically don't bother with the rest of this stuff. This is just volume, and you can have modulators, and you can then with any of this stuff, like for example volume, you can have it so that the X modulator thing on here, wherever you got this, controls the volume or something else like that. It's a 3-dimensional modulator thing as well. It's got an X, a Y, and a Z. So, you know, you could do it that way. There's other sections over here. There's this image thing where you can give it a sample, and it will recreate it with sine harmonics. Let me just get rid of that. So yeah, I think this just changes the start point, and this is the speed. You can put it in reverse. Wait, what? Why does that stop it from looping? I'm not sure. I don't know why that stops it from looping, but it should loop. You can also have it ping pong loop, which means instead of looping, it will go play it back in reverse, and then it'll start looping. Or you can have it one shot, so it doesn't loop. Most of these other settings aren't that important, really. Effects is just inbuilt effects, but you can do this just in the mixer with other effects, so you know, don't bother too much with this in my opinion. An advanced section where you can set the order that these different things happen and do a bunch of things that are very niche that you'll probably won't need to use. I suppose the only thing I will mention that you might want to use is ramp. Every single synthesizer often has an inbuilt ramp time, which is a few milliseconds that it takes before the sound actually gets to its full volume. Even if you set it to have no attack, no fade-in time, they will still add an extra bit of fade-in time so it doesn't instantly click, make an annoying click sound and snap to the volume that you want. However, if you have an especially sharp sounding sound, you might want to remove this ramp. So I think this is one of the few synthesizers where you can actually turn off the ramp back like that. Or increase it, if you really wanted to do that. But, you know, again, still very, very niche. Very, very unlikely to be important. So yeah, that's Harmer. I think that's everything I want to talk about with Harmer. It's not going to be super, super in-depth, but yeah. There's Layer over here. I'm not going to lie, I can't really help you with Layer. Doesn't have any manual help section. And I swear, like, this is not easy. Like, okay, so from what I understand, Layer is something that you're supposed to use to combine multiple synths into one. So you can start playing notes on Layer, and if you have multiple synths connected to it, it will play the notes on all those synths. But here's the thing. When I try and use this, you go and set children, and it will tell me, hey, you don't have anything selected. So I realise, okay, so I need to put the synth in first, and then while I've got this thing open, I need to click on this synth, and then while that's pressed down, while that's still pressed down, can I even do it like that? Oh wait, how did I even do this before? Set children, no channel selected, and then I click that. Right, yeah, now I've got them both pressed, and I say set children, and there we go. It's worked now. The serial children button doesn't seem to do anything. And now, if I start doing things on here, you can hear it's doing what the drum axe is doing. But then, if I try to set other children, it will just overwrite the one I already had. So I can't seem to get multiple things onto this layer. So I have no idea what's going on with that, but I've never found this important. And I know that's what it does, I just don't know how to use it. It doesn't add anything to the sounds you combine together, it's just something for organisation purposes if you want to do it like that. So yeah. MIDI out, this is just, well, a MIDI output thing. You can basically send information to devices that you have connected to FL Studio that want MIDI information. If you don't have anything like that, then don't use this thing. It's useless. Mini synth. This is a subtractive synthesizer that's overall, it's kind of like DX10. It's not like it's bad or anything, it's just kind of useless. It's like there are better synths out there. You basically have a saw wave here, or a saw and a saw. Do you think is another saw an octave down? A pulse. Yeah, I don't know what that's supposed to be. Saw and a square. You get all these different options basically. Some of these are like weird kind of things. And then you can add noise if you want. And there's a modifier thing here. I don't get exactly what this does, but it changes your wave somehow. This is the only thing that this synth has that seems to be unique. I don't know what this does, to be honest. It seems to kind of combine a square wave with the saw wave a bit. I don't know, for sure at least. Anyway, you can add a filter and you can add an FM modulator. I think you could add an FM modulator, couldn't you? oscillator, mod wheel, filter. Oh no, it wasn't I don't know where I got those FM from now. What you can do is you can have this LFO modulate the modifier, which is the only thing about this that slightly interests me, because that might have potential, but this synth seems so restrictive that it's not going to have much potential. So yeah, this is just an envelope for the thing. This is just so that you can, you know, filter things out, so you can have low passes and high passes and stuff, and you can have the LFO control the high passes, the frequency, the filters, the frequencies, or the modulator or the modifier or the oscillator. And then there's just inbuilt delay, chorus, phaser, and distortion, all stuff that you can have as effects on their own in the mixers anyway. Then we get to morphine. Morphine is a tragedy. I have been messing around with morphine a lot because I was hoping this would be a sleeper kind of synth that no one really used, but they didn't realize it was actually good. And you know what? It was so close to being good, but they just messed it up. So morphine is another additive synthesizer. As you can see, we have sine harmonics here. And we can change the panning of each of these oscillators, as well as add some detune to them. And also we can have it so that they all have different amounts of velocity, which doesn't do anything right now, but if we sent it through something that put different effects on depending on the velocities, it would pick up on those different velocities. And then window, which apparently is just another volume automation thing, which we were mad about. I was mad about that because I was trying to figure out what this was for ages, and I really thought this might be the thing that would make it really interesting, but now all this really has that's very interesting is you can kind of fine tune each harmonic. Which is slightly interesting. You can right click as well to reset them, which is nice. So yeah, this extremely scuff saw wave there. So the reason why this seemed very interesting to me is that you can have 4 different sounds that you make with all this additive synthesis. With this extra kind of fine tuning you can have for each harmonic, which can sound very interesting. And then you can crossfade very smoothly and like morph between these different shapes using this thing, where you can basically change whether it's generator A, generator B, generator C, generator D, which has all the volume. And this seemed really interesting to me, and I was like, wow, this seems like has a lot of potential. And then I saw this modulation section, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So then I thought, okay, well, what I can do is I can have it FM modulate things. I can take in something as a source and have it modulate the pitch of things. And I got excited. But here's the problem. The sources. You can only have an envelope be the source, which you create right here, which waves are way faster than envelopes, way faster. So if I try to FM modulate using a looping envelope, it's not going to sound right. I'm going to create one right now. This is the shortest possible envelope I can possibly have. This is the fastest it can possibly go, right? And I'm going to set it to modulate the master pitch. Wait just a minute, is the envelope actually working? Yeah. And to be fair, it's slightly interesting, but like, that's the fastest it can go. You know, you don't want to have this effect. You want it to sound like it's one kind of constant tone because it's going that fast. Which this is getting close to, but this is the fastest it can go. And it doesn't go any faster than that. So that means we can't really use waves as FM modulators here, because all these other settings, there's so many other settings, and these are all just for like if you plug in a MIDI keyboard. If they've got knobs on the keyboard, you can have the knobs on the keyboard move that thing. That's such a waste. If one of these things was just the waves that we create in these generators, this would be an amazing synthesizer. But nah, it's just okay. To be fair, this appears to be made more to try and recreate real life instruments synthetically. Which, to be fair, a lot of these synthesizers are. But I just think that's such a shame because I feel like this has so much potential, and it's kind of squandered it. I had actually made a few presets for this, which I'll quickly show off. Because I thought I would get more into this. So there's E-Bell, which is something that I was trying to make a bell sound. It kind of sounds like a bell, but it also sounds a bit more like an piano in my opinion, so I called it E-Bell. And if I hold the note. What you have going on here is we have this set of harmonics, this set of harmonics. Just a minute, do you have any kind of panning or detune going on these? I don't think I did yet. Yeah, no. This set of oh, just those two. Yeah, and the morph mix here. Hang on. I'm kind of confused now, actually, because I could have sworn it was swapping between A and B a little bit as time. Oh no, right, that's what I was doing. I forgot to mention one of the coolest things about this. Not only can you swap between A and B, but you can also create different sets of harmonics for each of these A, B, C, D that changes as time goes on. So what's happening here is, as I press a note, it starts here, then it goes to here, and then it starts looping between this one, and this one, and up and down just means volume of all of these. So the doom is this, and the whining sounds terrible, but you know, that's just the sound it makes. Is these three looping over and over and over. Well, actually, it's ping-ponging. It's going from this one to this one to this one, and then playing in reverse to this one to this one to this one, and then starting over. So yeah, and it's doing that for both A and B. So yeah, that was what I did first. There was also Simple Sine Series, which is just, I wanted to hear what it sounded like if you quickly swap between all these different, first harmonic and then another harmonic kind of things. So yeah, I did that. It sounds like that. There was also Humane Saw, which was basically, I wanted to hear what it would sound like if I took a saw wave that I just drew. Like, I didn't make sure it was accurate and all that mathematically. I just drew it with mistakes on purpose, as long as they weren't crazy mistakes that completely altered the timbre of the sound massively. So it didn't sound quite like a perfect saw wave, and I had loads of small different panning differences on certain harmonics and detune differences, so they're not all perfectly on pitch. And then swap quickly between all these different, almost saw wave shapes, with different panning and different detune on different harmonics. And that's what I got. It's quite interesting because, of course, you can hear it swapping between them and looping between the different ones. If you try and distort that, I just realised, what have I done? Oh, okay, right, that's fair enough. Okay, if you're wondering what just happened there, I was pressing S to play a note on this at the same time as I was going to click this, and then it thought I was trying to save it, like I think that was a hotkey or something. So yeah, let's assign this a mixer track, and let's distort this wave shaper. Come on. Play a low note. So yeah. Play something really low, just a second. I can't play lower than that on the keyboard, but I can do this. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So yeah, you can do some cool things with this. I've still got the distortion on. The last one that I had showed was Distorted Desires, which, yes, that is a Persona reference, which... This one is just kind of weird. I think this is... I usually use OTT to just... Well, I suppose OTT isn't technically distortion. This doesn't sound how it usually does. Let me just add OTT instead. But this is made for very low notes. Yeah, that's more like it. So that's an interesting kind of trippy sound. It starts at generator D. It moves to be pretty close to generator A and get close to generator A and B, but more to B than A. And then it kind of swaps between these three kind of points constantly. So yeah. Or even what is this one? Because I don't see any frequencies here. I don't know if that's a glitch or not. I swear there were frequencies there. I don't know. So yeah, that's morphine. If you want to make some weird kind of textures with it to then later use in something else more complex, then yeah, maybe. But overall, it's a bit of a stretch to try and use it. So then there's Ogun. Ogun is weird. So basically, what this does is I think it's technically another additive synthesizer, but what it does is it uses computers, it uses kind of AI, I guess, to figure out its own sine harmonics over time as you hold the note to make it so that the sound constantly sounds different and to try and make it sound natural. However, I find that because of that, the way it works and the fact that you can't really change much about it, it's a sound with very few. Although it's technically it's technically very deep and complex, and it's technically got a lot of variety. A lot of the differences it has between different sounds are very, very small, and generally you get a very small amount of variety. Almost all the sounds are. Or wait, we don't even get a sound for that one. Let me go into default again, just a sec. Default mode. Or sounds like that. So this rich thing controls how many harmonics you can have. This graph here is like saying, hey, once you get harmonics this high, you can kind of change how loud they are to discourage them from having harmonics at certain pitches and stuff like that. You can have the new harmonics fade in and fade out in different ways. But as you can tell just by listening to this, it's interesting, but it's hard to control and it sounds very off a lot of the time, unless you're making the same kind of belly sound, which usually sounds right, but it's very kind of repetitive. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend Ogun. And yeah, as I mentioned before, Ogun, everything in Ogun is just Ogun presets. So yeah, when you've got a synth like that, which doesn't look too great, and then on top of that, you just have something that's just presets for that and not as customizable yet.